to my channel. So we're almost at the end of the month, and I just wanted to come on here and update you on my 30 books in 30 days attempt. I didn't make it. You're not surprised. You're not surprised. I know you're not. But I've been reading a lot. I've finished some things since the last time we spoke. So I just wanted to share what I've been reading and to tell you what I'm currently reading, and will continue reading until the absolute end of the month and even beyond. But more details on that for now. So in the last 24 hours or so, I finished 4 books. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but it's reasonable. So the first book was a book that I should have read before the weekend. It was a children's book introducing the state of Rhode Island, because like I told you in my previous video, we went to Rhode Island last weekend and we had a fantastic time. But you know, when you go on a trip and you say, I will come back here because I had so much fun and there's so much else that I wanted to do that I didn't do. That was how we felt about Rhode Island, about Newport, Rhode Island specifically. And so I learned some history both on the trip and some things that I learned after the trip. So I was really glad that I read the book, even though I read it afterwards. That's a long-winded way of saying that I read this book introducing Rhode Island, and I read it after we came back from our trip to Newport, but it was still fine because those are things that I think you could learn anytime. One of the bits of trivia that I learned was that the artist who painted the portrait of George Washington that appears on the $1 bill, his name is Stuart, and he was born in Newport, Rhode Island. And I just learned that after we came back from the trip when I was reading the book. And then I shared it with my husband, and he said, oh yeah, I knew that. Because my husband had visited Rhode Island. He visited Newport some years prior to us meeting, and so he knew that. I didn't. So maybe next time we go, we will investigate Stuart's museum, because I think there's a museum dedicated to his work. So yeah, that was the next book that I read in this whole 30 in 30 challenge. Speaking of children's books, my daughter and I read this illustrated edition of Alice in Wonderland. Of course, this is based on the story by Lewis Carroll, and it was illustrated by Amanda Gulliver. And this was a gift from an old friend of mine, and she used to read it with her daughter and son, and so she had passed it on to me. And so I was really happy to have this beautifully illustrated book in my collection. And you know, as my daughter's getting older, I said we'd read it together. One of the things that I wanted to do this month was to reread Alice in Wonderland, and so I read this, and it counts because it has an ISBN number, and it's a book that we read together. And I enjoyed reading it with my daughter. She loves the pictures, and she loves sitting with me and for us to read together, even if she doesn't specifically, even if she's not completely following the story. And this one, this edition, this illustrated edition, is actually pretty difficult to follow in terms of the story part of the text. So reading it with my daughter, she's 3, she's learning to read, she has some sight words that she knows, and so she's able to see and identify some of the words on the page, and so that was fun for her. And of course, she loved the pictures, like I said, she loved the artwork, and so this was great. And if you know the story of Alice in Wonderland, then this may be a way to introduce the book to someone new. But in terms of following the story, just the story, this book doesn't really do that. It is a very abridged edition. It gives highlights. It is a highlight of the Alice in Wonderland story, but it doesn't explain some of the things that I feel like need explanation. So, like, I'll give you an example. So when Alice arrives at the house, she sees a duchess. Inside, a duchess was singing to a baby. The cook was stirring some soup. Why is your cat grinning? Asked Alice. It's a Cheshire cat, snapped the Duchess, and she gave the baby to Alice. I'm going to play croquet with the Queen, said the Duchess. Alice took the baby and walked outside. The baby grunted. It had changed into a pig. Alice put the pig down and it trotted away happily. She saw the Cheshire cat sitting in a tree. Like, that is an example of what happens in this book in terms of a scene that is really lengthy in the original story. And there are a lot of other twists and turns and puns that are necessary for understanding and appreciating and enjoying the story, and they're left out here. So like I said, it gives highlights of the story, but it doesn't really do a great job of following the original storyline. So I don't know, this was great for some things. So that was my second book that I am wrapping up for this video. So aside from that, I did read, so aside from those two children's books, I didn't just read children's books to finish up the challenge, right? I also read this translated fiction. This is Balzac and the Little Chinese Seamstress by Sijie, and this was translated from the French by Ina Rilke. I really like this. This was a really intriguing story because in this we're reading a fictionalization of the re-education that happened to teenage boys, teenage children in the 1980s under the Mao regime in China. And in this one, we are learning about two city boys who are sent to the mountain villages to be re-educated because their parents have been classed as enemies of the state, and so the children have to be schooled so that they don't turn out the way their parents did. That's what was happening in this period. And so we learn about these two boys who are sent to this village. They were friends before, they continue to be friends, they're living together, but they're being closely watched or guarded by the villagers and the village headmen. And what happens when one of them develops a romantic relationship with someone, and how it impacts the friendship, but also what the friend does in order to assist with that romance. There's also a big part of this book that is a tribute to literature and the impact that literature can have on our lives and on our relationships, whether that is positive or negative, however you view it based on the ending of this story, or just your general viewpoint. So I really like this because I learned a little bit about Chinese history in this book. But it wasn't just one of those books that is educational. It was also really, really entertaining, and I love how the author writes about the character's love for books and the desire for knowledge and interaction with other things in the world that are not a part of our everyday lives. I love how that is described in here. So really enjoyed this one as well. Balzac and the Little Chinese Seamstress. And then the last book that I'll chat about in this video is The Puzzler by A.J. Jacobs, which I buddy read with Patrice Jones, and we read this over the course of a little over a month. We took our time reading this book because we were both really enjoying it. And this is A.J. Jacobs doing a deep dive into different kinds of puzzles and showing how he interacted with these puzzles to write this book. So it's memoir style research, showing us his doing puzzles and him also creating puzzles and sharing his creations with us. So each chapter of the book is dedicated to a different kind of puzzle. So obviously the puzzles that are featured on the cover are mentioned in the book, like the Rubik's Cube and the crossword and the jigsaw puzzle, but he also explored all the puzzles that you could probably think of, or at least that I could. So he included rebuses and mazes and logic puzzles and visual puzzles and Sudoku and Ken and cryptics and chess and Japanese puzzle boxes and scavenger hunts, all of those. So I love that each one of the chapters does some exploration of the topic, and he did interviews with someone who's an expert in that field or someone who's just really versed in that field. And this book took him to places that you never would have expected that a fascination with puzzles would probably take a person. And so I love this. And at the end of most of the chapters, not all, at the end of most of the chapters, he presented puzzles that the reader could also work on, and I loved it. So this was a gift from Penguin Random House last year, and I should have read the book when I first received it because there was a time-sensitive puzzle opportunity in here which I did not take advantage of because it took me so long to read the book. So that was a complete fail on my part, but this is a great book whenever you read it. So thank you, Penguin Random House, for sending me this copy. And so yeah, these are the 4 books that I have finished most recently. And like I said, I'm going to continue reading. I'm going to see how long it will take me to finish the 30 books. So I probably won't finish my 30th book today, but maybe I'll finish tomorrow. So hope you'll join me for the next video where I'll share what else I've been reading. So thank you so much for watching this one, and until we come back for another video, happy reading. Bye.